Here is tonight's football.
Oh my goodness, boy, how much of that the referee saw and what
Potential right on their hands.
A dog ended a professional goalkeeper's career.
What a tackle!
Scotland would invade the Wembley pitch and break the goalposts. Manchester United would get relegated.
Pulled across for law!
England would fail to qualify for not one, but 2 World Cups. And an FA Cup match became so violent that a modern referee felt it deserved 11 red cards. Ladies and gents, if you think modern football's chaotic, welcome back to the crazy world of 1970s football.
Good 1-2, and a good shot, and what a goal! What a goal!
So a few months ago, I uploaded a video called 70s Football Was Insane. You guys seem to love it. I enjoyed making it because I've got a real geeky little interest of watching back old 70s football clips. It's hard to comment on an era I never actually lived through. I wasn't born until 1989. I think you guys who did live through it, buckle up tight because we're gonna have another journey back down memory lane. But for those like me, maybe younger than me, probably younger than me, with a fresher hairline than me, probably need to be prepared for your mind to be blown.
It's broken out again, and now this time a complete free-for-all.
If, as I said at the start, if you think today things are a bit chaotic, they don't even touch the surface of what the 1970s had to offer. So through things like the Big Match Revisited, shows like that and clips on YouTube, us, can never class myself as a youngster, get to try and understand what our parents talk about when they say they miss the good old days. Let's crack on.
Oh, what a goal by Mallory!
So football fans today always complain that the game has gone soft. Every time there's a slight point of contact, players will roll around on the floor, VAR will come out, multiple camera angles, analysing in slow motion, which normally isn't the most crazy of tackles. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, we go back to the beginning of the decade, 1970.
By Vanetti. Jones. Nick Jones saying, I went for the ball, but the referee is telling him to be a wee bit careful.
Now Chelsea and Leeds had just drawn in the FA Cup final 2-2. Back then they didn't go to penalties, they had a replay. And the problem was that the Horse of the Year show at Wembley had completely destroyed the pitch. So the replay wasn't even played at Wembley, it was played at Old Trafford, of course, in Manchester.
Jack Charlton, not the last out for Leeds United, the substitute behind him.
Now, 18 days later, this replay would take place and it would become legendary, or infamous would probably be a better way of describing it. For Leeds, you had the likes of Billy Bremner and Norman Hunter. For Chelsea, you had Chopper Harris and Eddie McCready. Now, Eddie McCready, probably most known for his tackle in this game, which was more of a kung fu kick to Billy Bremner's face.
Jones has Bremner there. Oh, he's taken the right in his face. McCready's face. Bremner must be wondering what hit him. McCready was in full flight.
One of the craziest tackles you'll ever see in football. Now, this match felt more like a pub scrap with football being played in the background. So many fouls.
Webb to Jones. To Gray. Gray brought down by Harris. And Harris has caught him behind that left knee.
David Ellery, a referee for the Premier League in the 90s and I think the 2000s, later reviewed the game and said the game deserved 6 red cards. But then later on, comparing it to more modern standards, Michael Oliver, referee, said it deserved more like 11 red cards.
And Jones has scored the important first goal. Charlton. Charlton.
The game looked as though it might erupt before half-time. There were 1 or 2 niggly moments, and I thought maybe the teams had come to their senses, but...
And Charlton brought down from behind by Cook. Hutchinson. Cook who suddenly sprinted away. And Osborne and Bremner. And, oh, Hutchinson right into Bremner. There was no excuse for that, and he must be booked. Really, Hutchinson asked for trouble. And Osborne has equalised, and the Chelsea fans have suddenly erupted. They've been rather subdued. Now, he's fouled. And Bremner letting his temper get the better of him. There's not much doubt about that foul by Baldwin on Cooper. And then from is a goal! Yes, a goal! Webb! Chelsea have won it. And there's Webb getting mobbed. The scorer of the winning goal. Crowd cheer.
But again, what a crazy way to start the decade. Okay, although a crazy game, it's probably to be expected when we think back to 70s football, but what a lot of people forget is later on in November of that year, one of the more freak accidents happened. You saw at the beginning, I said, a dog ended a goalkeeper's career, and he kind of did. Brodie, the man behind the posts for Brentford. Brentford were playing Colchester. This is before the glamorous Brentford we see now in the Premier League. Brentford were playing Colchester, and a dog got onto the pitch. Now, this isn't the first time I've seen a dog run onto a football pitch, and you can hear from the commentators' remarks, everyone's finding it funny, light-hearted. It's the 70s, so the game carries on, of course. Ref doesn't stop it because there's a dog interfering with the football. But anyway, all that fun comes to an end for Brodie, the Scottish goalkeeper, an experienced goalkeeper, when he was completely flattened, taken out by this dog. Now, we need to say that he did end his career in the long term, but he did go on to make a few more appearances. But that knee that was shattered during that encounter with a dog definitely put the end to his career. And apparently it wasn't the only freak accident he'd experienced. He'd also had stones thrown at him from the crowd, which injured his knee previously. And apparently also there was a hand grenade thrown at him in the goal mouth, which obviously proved to be a fake hand grenade. But Mr. Brodie, unlucky, disliked. We can laugh about it, but poor Mr. Brodie, that would put an end to his football career.
John Gilchrist to Cook. That's one for Brian Gibbs to chase. There's hardly any chance here. And still that pooch is in it. What a tackle. What a great tackle. But unfortunately, Chick Brodie seems to have been hurt by that.
Stamford Bridge saw the first in a season of refereeing rows when Chelsea took the lead against Ipswich with this Alan Hudson effort. As the slow-motion replay clearly shows, the ball did not go in the net and the referee is a plonker.
If you saw part one, you won't be surprised to hear that animals weren't the only unexpected visitors onto the football pitch. It became commonplace in the 1970s for fans to pitch invade. So story number 3, guys, this might not involve a dog, but it involves a 1974 clash, or clashes, between Newcastle United and Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup. Now, we mentioned at the start that this is an era pre-penalties where replays would take place, and that's what happened. Essentially at St James's Park, over 50,000 people would cram in to the ground for this FA Cup encounter. Now, Newcastle would have a player sent off, down to 10 men.
Oh my godfathers, he is going to be sent off. He has said something foolish again, and Howard is going off. Well, of course, that is rather foolish.
And then they would go down 3-1. Nottingham Forest would take a 3-1 lead. Fans, thinking their FA Cup dreams were over, would pitch invade in the hope that the game might be abandoned. And it looked like that would be the case. Took a while to get the fans off the pitch.
The police lead off a Newcastle fan who wanted to protest to the referee. And violence erupts behind the goal now.
But no, they got them off the pitch. Newcastle fans hadn't got what they wished for, or had they? Because despite all this antics, despite all this drama, Newcastle would somehow, with 10 men, end up winning the game 4-3. Now, kind of understandably, Nottingham Forest Players, fans, manager were pissed off. They said that this interruption from the fans definitely caused the game to go the way it did, and the FA did agree. The FA agreed to replay the game at Goodison Park. Now this replay of the game would end 0-0. You're thinking surely penalties would have been brought in at this point. How exhausting having to keep replay the game, but no, a third time. The game was played 3 bloody times. The third time again at Goodison Park, with Newcastle United winning this one 1-0. The 1970s, we're not shocked at this point. It was crazy, it was exhausting, and yes, one FA Cup game was played 3 bloody times.
It's my favourite game, cricket.
No, not mine.
No?
No, I like the straight left, the right hook, the uppercut.
Boxing.
Football.
There was a regular legs broken, you know. I mean, two couple of legs broken every week somewhere because the boots were so heavy and it was so easily done and there was no protection.
Man United joined Leeds in being banned from playing at home after a knife-throwing incident at Old Trafford.
Okay, I know you loyal subscribers know I was born in Hereford, and we can't talk about the FA Cup in the 1970s without showing that Ronnie Radford goal. We spoke about it in part 1. Here we go. Greatest FA Cup goal in history? I think so.
Radford again. Oh, what a goal! What a goal! Radford the scorer, Ronnie Radford. And the crowd are invading the pitch. Oh, he's got it! Ricky George! Ricky George has done it! What a moment for Hereford!
Back to the pitch invaders though. If you thought that was a little bit crazy, again, we mentioned in the intro, Scotland fans, the Scottish, would take pitch invading to a whole new level in a game versus England at the home of football.
And that is the first time in Wembley history that England have been beaten here 3 times in one season.
Have you seen the recent video about the claims from Scotland that they created football, and all the Argentine shirts we've seen celebrating, or the Scots in Argentine shirts, should I say, celebrating our exit from the World Cup? It was equally as tense back in the 1970s.
A 10-year wait it's been. They invaded the pitch 10 years ago, and they're here again.
So England versus Scotland is the oldest international rivalry. The first ever international game happened between the two, and if you want to learn more about that, again, I made a video in Scotland all about the history, or the early history of football, and particularly football in Scotland, Glasgow especially. However, this is 1977. The landscape is a little bit different. I mentioned Scotland fans mocking our recent exit, wearing Argentina shirts and stuff. It was a little bit different in the 1970s. As again, I'll get onto it in a moment. We spoke in the intro that England weren't, I say, the force they are today. We've still not won anything, but at least we're qualifying for World Cups and getting to semi-finals. Back in the 70s, we weren't. However, despite that, despite the fact that Scotland had an incredible team in the 1970s, they hadn't actually won at Wembley for 10 years. Up to this point in 1977, but that would change. They'd win this game 2-1. They'd go 2-0 up, we'd pull back a goal, and of course the Scotland fans would celebrate this victory by not only entering the pitch, but conquering Wembley, jumping on the goalposts.
England's players walking sadly away, but Scotland with a goal just before half-time, and an important second one from Dalglish, have won the Home International Championship outright in Bruce Rioch's first season as captain. This biannual pilgrimage hasn't been a happy one over the last few years, but there's certainly going to be some celebrations tonight.
My only recent memory of something like that would be, do you remember a few years ago when Man City won the Premier League, their fans jumped on the goalpost, but that was their own ground. That was in celebration, and I know this was in celebration, but obviously it had a little bit more of a bitter, of a sinister context. I don't know, Scots might disagree, but they'd get on the goalposts, they break, and it's become an iconic moment in Scottish football history, of course, breaking that 10-year curse at Wembley. This was at the British Home Championships. Of course, there were a lot more home nations meetings back then in football, and it has become a legendary scene. Maybe not for us English, but definitely for the Scottish. Of course, we get on to England again in a moment, but that wasn't the only crazy tragedy. From an English football perspective, of course, Manchester United, the Giants, would be relegated in 1974.
Pulled across for Law! Dennis has done it!
Now, my old man's quick to remind me that he's not a Glory fan because his first full season supporting Manchester United was the season that followed in the second division, which was a crazy season in itself. But of course, only 6 years after becoming European champions, as a reminder, Celtic are the first ever British team to win the European Cup in 1967. Again, another Celtic video will follow in the next week or so. I've been really busy, so I've not quite got around to that one. But Manchester United are the first English team to win the European Cup, beating Benfica in England, we mentioned Wembley, in 1968. But that had changed by the early 70s. The team was ageing, so Matt Busby had stepped down as manager. Bobby Charlton had retired. The relationship between the club and Georgie Best had deteriorated. The club was in a bit of crisis. Now, I've been watching back those match of the day 70s specials, what they call match of the 70s, something like that. And United, a couple of seasons prior, were fighting for the title. They were still good, but this season it all went to pot. Now, the famous narrative is that Manchester United legend Dennis Law would relegate the club from a backheel goal playing for the rivals Manchester City. Obviously he didn't celebrate much, but in fact, even if United had won that game versus City, they still would have been relegated because results elsewhere would have meant they were relegated. So although it's a nice, not really a nice narrative, although that is the narrative, it's not 100% factually true.
We've got an invasion of the pitch that we could well do without. The referee is wanting to take the players off. There are officials down on the touchline talking to him. It's as though we've got flower bombs or something being thrown from the Stretford end now. Well, it's smoke of some kind coming from behind that goal. Police are there in numbers. Martin Buchan leading one away. And we've now got fans on the field again, spilling over from the corner on my right. The end of Manchester United's 36 years unbroken run in the first division.
Of course, the following season, Manchester United asserted their dominance on the second division. The attendances were still sky high. Again, my old man said about those crazy games in the second division. Old Trafford was bouncing, and of course they'd return straight back. But maybe not so shockingly for modern day fans who've witnessed Manchester United over the past few years, but definitely for us 90s nostalgia merchants, the thought of Manchester United being in the second division, what's now the Championship, is almost unthinkable. But not in the 70s. All right, Ryan, you can't keep putting it off, mate. The heartbreak of talking about England recently anyway is painful enough. But in the 70s, for the generation that grew up in the 1970s, it must have been even more painful. I don't know. Maybe they didn't expect what we expect. But of course, England would enter the decade as world champions off the back of the 1966 win. Prior to the 1970 World Cup, they were world champions. Now, the 1970 World Cup wasn't disastrous. They get to the quarter-finals, but then what followed definitely was. The 1974 campaign was a disaster. Poor results away at Poland against Wales basically led to Poland coming to Wembley and England needing a win on home soil. Now, prior to the game, character, legend of the game, Brian Clough, probably the best manager to never manage England, made reference to the Polish goalkeeper being a clown. Well, unfortunately, it was Cloughy that night who was the clown, because the Polish goalkeeper pulled out a masterclass of a performance, held England to a 1-1 draw, and obviously they failed to qualify.
The shot is on for Domaski. Oh, he scored! Domaski's got a goal! Peters up, the flick on for Clark, he knocks it back, and there's the equaliser! No, it's been knocked off. Shannon knocked it in. It's a penalty on him and the goalkeeper he hopes to beat, Tomaszewski. Shilton can't even look at all, though. Clark, he's got it! Have England got time now? No, they have not! It's over! It's all over. One of the blackest days.
You'd think, oh well, 4 years' time we'll be back. No, 1978 comes along, we failed to qualify once again. So a whole generation of English people, I'm sure the Scottish are loving this, by the way, because they really were, by 1978, a force. You know, we mentioned legends like Billy Bremner, Dennis Law, all those people from the 1970s. Scotland were even quite confident that they were going to win the World Cup in 1978. England didn't have that confidence, maybe that arrogance that we have today. And yeah, it took until the 1982 World Cup for us to, which was in Spain, I believe, the 1982 World Cup, for us to eventually get there. Enough of England. I'm absolutely burnt out from England. Let's move on.
Hey, Buzz! For missing the target from there, you want bloody shooting!
Okay, I've got a good one involving England. So in 1978, after the World Cup, We've referenced Brian Clough, we've referenced Nottingham Forest, but it was Viv Anderson in 1978 who was to make history. Now our younger generations, we talk about keeping politics away from football. I've been guilty of that as well. But of course, the political involvement or these campaigns are around because of the horrible treatment in the past. The 1970s were a different landscape, especially at football. And again, I can only talk about what I've heard and people close to me sharing their experiences. But there was a lot of racism on the terraces. We can't glorify everything from the 1970s. And the black players were subject to a lot of abuse. But despite that, Viv Anderson and other trailblazers, black men here in the country, were becoming great players, of course. A right back for Nottingham Forest, who, as a reminder, would later go on to shock the world, become English champions as well as two-time European champions. But Cloughie's right back would start in 1978 in a game at Wembley versus Czechoslovakia. Hopefully I've said that right. And make history, the first ever black man to represent England. And again, not referencing this most recent campaign too much. Of course, Jed Spence became the first Muslim player. Now we all get, why are they kind of singling him out for this reason? It should be about the football, but as a white man, as not representing a minority, maybe we don't understand the importance of that, but let's not downplay that. It was monumental. Anyway, let's get on to some more light-hearted stuff once again. All right, unintentionally, these are linking really well together, and they do seem to be quite orientated around Nottingham Forest and Brian Clough. But again, this is the 1970s, so it's very much relevant. Now, just as football was changing socially, we mentioned Viv Anderson, it was also changing economically because, again, Cloughie would spend £1 million on Sir Trevor Francis.
Turning McClintock nicely. Then Leach. Fight try! Oh, well, what about that?
Now, Trevor Francis had made a name for himself at Birmingham City. He was the Jude Bellingham of his time. Now, apparently Cloughie has since said he actually spent £999,000 on him, but obviously the transfer fee with everything else added on, it did equate to over £1 million. The press loved it, and of course, just like now, the pressure was put onto him. Labelled the first ever £1 million player here. Obviously the pressure was on, but did he repay them? Of course he bloody did, because in 1979, we've mentioned it, Forest would win their first of 2 European Cups. And there we go, he definitely repaid Nottingham Forest with that goal. Now again, £1 million today wouldn't even buy a teenage player's left boot, let alone a decent player like very, very good player like Trevor Francis. But it just shows the evolution of the game, because we still have these same conversations. We still speak about price tags. We spoke about Elliot Anderson. Again, if we're referencing Forest, just going to Manchester City, will he live up to his price tag? Well, obviously, if City step up and get to the final of the Champions League this year and Elliot Anderson scores the winner, just like Trevor Francis back in the 70s, it's money well spent. Okay then guys, to summarise, England would start the decade as world champions. They'd end the decade having not qualified for 2 World Cups. We had the first £1 million player, the first black player to play for England. Manchester United were relegated. Scotland would wreck the goalposts. A dog would end a goalkeeper's career, amongst the usual pitch invasions, muddy pitches, all the stuff we'd expect from 1970s football. But in reality, this, the end of part 2, still hasn't even touched the surface of what was a crazy decade. As you guys said in the comments last time, you can't glorify it too much. It was brutal defenders trying to break the legs of players who were better than them technically, but that just shows how good they were technically. These flair players, the Kenny Dalglishes, the Georgie Best, etc., they were playing against the likes of Chopper Harris, trying to hack them down, and they were still coming out with these beautiful goals. So how would they do in today's era? You let me know in the comments below. We're going to do a part 3, but I want you to share your memories of 1970s football down below. I'll see you in the next one. Make sure you are subscribed for the next video. I'll see you in that one.
But Arsenal had already shown they had the pedigree to fight back.
Disgraceful! Disgraceful!